Welcome back, everyone. So let's continue my Rocky reviews with Rocky 3. Rocky 3, rewatching this one, I don't think it's as good as the first two. I think that it's not a drastic departure from like the first two in terms of like, I love the first one. The first one's incredible. The second one I think is a great sequel, and this one is a good sequel, if that makes sense. Like, I think this is a good, solid sequel, but this one in Rocky 4, I read online that Sylvester Stallone said, like, while writing 3 and 4, he couldn't find, like, since these were kind of made close to the same time, whenever he wrote these and directed them, he couldn't really find something that was, like, plot heavy. He just really, it was more about the fighting, which some people prefer, but I thought that this, I don't know, like, it just didn't have as much of a balance as, like, the first two, or the first two, you cared about the characters so much, and then they have the great fight at the end. And in this one, you care about the characters, but there's more fighting and montages to where it kind of gets just repetitive for me. Like, I got kind of bored, like, with some of the times whenever we just had montages, because there were a lot of them. And Rocky 4 does that too, but I think Rocky 4 is way more fun. Like, this one is still fun in ways, but it's not as fun as Rocky 4, from what I remember. And I liked, like, I do enjoy Rocky 3, it's just, to me, it felt like these movies kept going downward so far, in terms of the first one being amazing, and the second one's great, and then this one is good. So, we'll see how it goes with the rest of the sequels, because there's some I really do love after this, but this is an interesting one. So starting out, I loved how it did the recap of 2, like how the second movie recapped the first one. This does the same thing, except for it doesn't like continue the moment that it ends like 2 does to 1. This one fast forwards 3 years later with actually a cool montage at the beginning where it shows Rocky in his prime, showing him winning all these championships, being on TV, being on commercials, being extremely famous. So I did like how they did a quick, brief summary of like how much he has changed in 3 years. So I think that's really cool. So I do like that a lot. I do like the opening a lot, and I like the villain a lot. I thought Clubber Lang is a cool villain. Like, he's really fun, and he's intimidating in a way, but I like how this villain is also arrogant too. Like, he's just an arrogant dude. Like, he wants to just fight Rocky, and he doesn't think smartly about, like, the way that he tries to fight him. He just anything that comes out of his mouth goes. Like, he'll immediately say something without thinking about it and just be kind of a dick to Rocky. But I mean, he's trying to get him to fight, but it just feels like this character I did enjoy a lot, and Mr. T is great. He's great in this role, and it's introducing Mr. T, so this was his first thing he was in. That was really cool. So I really enjoyed that. And I really like how Rocky's life is great now after 3 years of fighting from the second one. This is 3 years later. I really like that, and I like just showing the fights that he's in, and I liked how he fought Hulk Hogan as Thunder Lips in this movie. That was funny seeing Hulk Hogan in this. And I liked his relationship with Mickey. Rocky and Mickey have a great relationship in this movie, and it pays off in a great way because Rocky realizes that Mickey kind of had setups for Rocky to keep him going, even though he just kind of felt betrayed. And Mickey, and there's this great acting scene between them both where Rocky is pissed at Mickey and tells him like, what for? And then he tells him that I want to train again. Like, I want to, like, he was going to retire again, but he wants to train and fight Clubber Lang. So Mickey does it with him, and they do it one last time, as they say. And besides the fact that Mickey dies and Apollo takes over, there isn't much of a plot. Like, it's definitely less plot heavy in a lot of ways. So that's why I do enjoy the plot points of this movie, but it's just kind of, they're not as much there as they are in the first two. But when there is, that's totally fine. Like, whenever Rocky goes out to fight Clubber Lang and loses, Mickey has a heart attack before it happens, and Mickey tells him, go out there, like, you have to go out. And Rocky's distraught, like, he's horrified, he's afraid Mickey's gonna die. He goes out and fights Clubber Lang and loses, probably because he was so worried about Mickey. And then he goes back, and Adrian told Rocky that Mickey wouldn't leave until he saw Rocky again. So Mickey dies on the table, right in front of Rocky, and that's a great scene, a great performance by Sylvester Stallone in that scene. He's great in all the movies, but that's a great moment where he breaks down after Mickey dies. Like, that's really, really sad and really, really worked, because Mickey was a great character in the first two movies as well. So this is really great. So I love that as well. And it's so sad because he lost Mickey, but then he lost the championship too. What he's had for a long time, he lost to Clubber Lang. And it's so sad that Mickey dies, but in his place, I love that Apollo takes place of Mickey, and it feels very, like, in a way, like it works very well, because Apollo and Rocky had this rocky relationship in the first two, where Apollo just wanted to fight Rocky in the first one, and then he won, but then in the second one he was considered a faker by a lot of people, so he wanted to fight Rocky again. So they've had this antagonistic, like, connection with each other in the first two movies, and I love how Apollo takes over, and they gain a friendship, and Apollo actually has the most character development in this movie, and he's great. He's really good. Carl Weathers is awesome in this movie. And I really liked how they humanized him a lot more than in the first two, even though he was humanized a little bit, but he's not in the movie as much in the first two movies. So I love that we get scenes with him, and I love that we get a lot with him in this movie. That's really cool in place of Mickey, and it works very well. So I really enjoyed that aspect, that Apollo's more important in this movie. Even though it was already before, but he's got more screen time. So I really love that. And there's just some great scenes in this movie where there's this one scene on the beach where Rocky and Adrian are talking, and Adrian, like Rocky is so, like, he's not believing anymore on what he should do after Mickey died. And I love this conversation between them both. It's so good. It's so well written. It's such a well acted scene, where Rocky breaks down and he's like, "I'm afraid, all right, for the first time in my life, I'm afraid." And I love the response that Adrian gives him. She just says, like, "Apollo thinks you can do it, so can I." And, like, she gives him all this comfort. And I love the fact that she screams at him as more stronger of a person since the first movie too. Like, she is not as much of a shy woman anymore. And I love whenever Rocky says, like, "How'd you get so tough?" And then she says to him, "I live with a fighter." And it's just, it really works on their relationship level and just how these characters interact and how they've grown. I really love that as well. So there's some great scenes in this movie, and I do really love. But I felt like it was just the slowest one out of all of them for me, because it had a lot of montages that that were kind of forgettable. Like, it had a lot of forgettable montages where they were just like, because this is the third one. I mean, they did it again and again. But I just felt like the montages in this one were not as memorable. And they were really silly, too. There's a really silly moment, and I crack up. I think it's awesome, even though it's so silly, is where Rocky and Apollo, like, are training together, and then there's a scene where, like, Rocky and Apollo are in the water on the beach, and they do a slow-mo jump up and hug each other, and it's hilarious. Like, it's really funny. It's just so slow-mo, and it makes it really silly, but I totally am fine with that, because it was fun. Like, it was a funny scene. It gave it its charm, I thought, for this movie. And then another example of, like, cheesiness in this movie is where Clubber Lang looks at the screen whenever this interview is talking to him, like, "What do you want Rocky to feel?" And he just looks at the screen, or the camera, and goes, "Pain." Like, that's great. That's really great, and I love that as well. And whenever it gets to the final fight is really good, and really, like the first two movies, it's a really good final fight. And it was really intense, and I thought whenever Rocky finally decked Clubber Lang, like, I thought it was really satisfying. Like, it actually made me go, "Yes, good, finally." Because Clubber Lang is just such a mean character throughout. Like, he's so so unlikable in a lot of ways. Like that's, but I do enjoy that he gave such a Mr. T gave such a good performance though. But I love the fact that this character is just so mean, and it felt so good whenever he got decked down and lost, and Rocky gained the championship back. That's great. So I love that, and I love how it ends like the first two, where it's got the music, it's got them all together, and it does the pause shot at the end of the movie, and then it does a new thing where in this movie, after they show the final scene of like the first two movies, where like I said, it's where it pauses on them on the stage. In this one, it keeps going, and in this, Rocky and Apollo are gonna have this fight together, like a private match. Nobody knows, like nobody else is there. It's just them. They're gonna match privately, like they're going to have a boxing match and see who wins, because they keep telling each other like, I'm gonna win, no, I'm gonna win, and it pauses on them punching each other, and then you don't know who wins the fight until like Creed, or I mean, until maybe Rocky Balboa, I think tells, like that movie tells who won, or Creed. I think maybe both of them do, but as if you just watch this one right at that moment, you'd be like, oh, it's a mystery to who won. But I like that fact that it's a mystery to if Apollo or Rocky won, because they both were gonna say, like, they both are really worthy adversaries. So I thought that was a cool like mystery before it was revealed. Like it's cool and it's revealed too in the other movies, but I like that ending like that. That's a cool open end. I thought that was great. So there are a lot of things that I really do enjoy about Rocky 3. The only thing that bogs it down is I think it's just not as interesting, because it isn't as much about story. There is story in it. There's some great moments with these characters, but there's a lot of scenes that are just montages that kind of just melded together for me, because there were a lot of them. And from what I remember from Rocky 4, there were a lot of montages in that too, but they were a lot more funnier and more silly and goofy, that they are more memorable. This one, a lot of them were just kind of played straight, except for like moments of like Rocky and Apollo slow-mo hugging in the water. Like that was funny, but usually it's just like kind of forgettable montages. But for the most part, unless it's something silly like that. So I thought that this did suffer from having less, like it was more montages and more fighting, but I felt like you needed more characters to care as much. And you do care enough, but it's just like, I felt like there was a lot of padding for this movie, even though it's shorter than the first two movies. This is an hour and 40 minutes, and the other two were 2 hours, but they feel quicker than this movie, so that's a weird thing. At least for me, I felt that way. So overall, Rocky 3 has its issues, but I really love a lot of things about it. I think it's a good sequel. I don't think it's as great as 2. It's not as fantastic as 1, of course, so I think that it is a solid sequel. It does a lot of things right. It's just kind of in the middle on a couple things, like so many montages that are kind of forgettable. So for me personally, but overall, this one was it was a fun watch still. It was fun regardless. It had a lot of great moments. It had some okay moments. So the first one, rewatching it, that I felt like there's a lot of moments that are okay and not like the whole movie's great. So yeah, that's pretty much all I could say about Rocky 3. So thank you guys so much for watching, and stay tuned for my Rocky 4 review.